What if I told you that putting down the booze, the substances, or the spicy materials online wasn't going to be enough to finally flush your addiction down the toilet? That's what's reviewed in Dopamine Nation, and that's what I am going to talk about today. Let's go.
Pattern to reset the dopamine system. Essentially, in order to break an addictive pattern, 30 days of zero interaction with that substance, that person, etc.
Right.
Is that correct?
And 30 days is, in my clinical experience, the average amount of time it takes for the brain to reset reward pathways, for dopamine transmission to regenerate itself.
My name is Casey. I am the Rumble Right Dad, and I have been in sobriety for more than 19 years, and I have been an addiction counselor for more than 13 years. And I have learned over that time that you can subtract drugs and alcohol and not really end up having a successful recovery. And that is because what nature abhors a vacuum. And if you just take out the only thing that was providing you dopamine, you will be left empty, as Anna Lembke says much in her book, Dopamine Nation, that we can use to try to restore that balance and actually help you feel good while you're still sober.
But there are also many folks we see who have kind of great parents and have had happy childhoods and have great social networks and work that they enjoy, and yet they still become addicted. And that's because we are wired to consume as much as possible of whatever releases dopamine in our brains to have survived evolution to this date. And yet we're living in this world where we have access to so many drugified substances and behaviors.
Lembke shows that our brain is a dopamine seesaw. So if you cast your dopamine levels up artificially by using some type of substance, then it will naturally decline as your brain tries to correct for that imbalance. So too can you exercise, do acupuncture, do a cold plunge, and your brain will go into discomfort level, and that will automatically correct into making you feel better once you stop that activity. So if it was a dopamine attempt to increase your dopamine through something like a cold plunge, you could get out of the water and feel exorbitantly better because your brain is correcting for that discomfort. So if you use a substance, you're going to crash automatically. If you do some uncomfortable activities intentionally, you will automatically have an incline of positive emotion and positive neurochemicals. Here's the flat truth of addiction recovery. Subtraction doesn't work. That's why treatment centers who cram people in here and give you a 30 or 90-day timeout, or sometimes even a 10-day timeout, often will help you get off of the substance, but they will not help you inculcate all of the value and meaning that you need to be able to persist in that recovery. So you can take a timeout, go into an adult timeout, go back into your life 30 days later, and end up going right back to using because we did not have the tools to add the value, something like faith, purpose, meaning, family, work, other exercise, things that make you feel better are not integrated into the recovery system early on, and therefore we end up relapsing at an extremely high rate. Now, people who take these statistics say that, up to 30% of their participants maintain their sobriety for a year, but that would be just in my own personal experience as an addiction counselor for 13 years, 30% would be an exceedingly high number because that might be the people who graduate treatment. And we all know that a lot of people who go to treatment do not graduate. So how many folks are really ending up maintaining the recovery for a year? It might be 10%, maybe 5% at the most, who enter into those treatment tours, maintain their recovery. And it's because when they get out, they still don't have a job. They still can't drive. They still don't have, a good relationship. They might not be able to integrate back into their family. And so without that meaning and purpose, without the addition of good things, the subtracting the drug will not work.
We're bound to encounter misery. People have become less and less happy over the past 20 to 30 years, and that decrease is most striking in the wealthiest nations in the world. A complete paradox when you think that we have so many privileges in this country, and yet we must be getting something fundamentally wrong. I think that what we're not recognizing is the ways in which overwhelming overabundance is actually a stressor. And because our brains were not wired for abundance, we were wired for pain. Our brains are compensating by downregulating all those feel-good hormones and neurotransmitters. The kernel of that is also the answer to our problems, which is that we have to actually intentionally seek out pain, and we have to downregulate our consumption.
I recommend that people read Dopamine Nation who have never experienced addiction, not because I want them to understand people who do have addictions, but because everyone is subject to the dopamine seesaw, and everyone can learn better how to manage their dopamine regulatory system, especially when we have things like smartphones in our pockets at all times that are promoting this drip, drip, drip of dopamine and taking away all of your ability to direct your activities later with motivation and with vigor. Because when you don't have dopamine, your goal-directed motivation is plummeting. And we have so many ways. The convenience and the constant dopamine in our modern era is preventing us from having a healthy existence. And we all need to look into this brilliant work by Anna Lembke. Not only do I recommend all my clients read it, I also recommend all my friends read it, because there are so many important ways about even how we parent, how we engage with our own smartphones and computers and technology, and how we can live a more abundantly motivated, energetic life by regulating our dopamine, fasting from tech, fasting from the things that are causing this cheap inculcation of dopamine into your system.
To me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All I gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else in the leprechaun say yeah? Yeah!
One thing that's important to note, that if you are addicted to spicy materials online, or a certain novel social media website, or anything like that, you will begin to tolerate it over time, because your brain will adjust and it will try to regulate that dopamine function that thing is providing. So knowing that, you have to recognize that your brain will always want to escalate the stimulus. That means you will need to go spicier on the things you watch. You will need to have more time on social media. You will need to post more or get more likes. And so as we adjust, we will need more. That's just the way your brain begins to tolerate any stimulus. It could be a substance off of the street. It could be the smartphone in your pocket. So do not ride the escalator up to the top without taking a break on the third floor every once in a while, in order that you can get back to regulation. And then when you start that stimulus again, whether it's social media or whatever, it will not require as much to get the same dopaminergic effect.
Could be a crackhead that got hold to the wrong stuff.
Johann Hari said that the opposite of addiction isn't recovery, it isn't sobriety, it's connection. But I would say this, the opposite of addiction is addition, because you cannot simply work under the subtraction mindset and have your recovery stay static. You can't just cut out the drug or leave a hole in your life. Addiction is beat by addition. I've seen it in my own recovery for the past 19 years and my 13 years as a substance use counselor. Real change happens when you add faith, purpose, work, family, friends. Without those, your sobriety will not last. So if you're struggling with spicy stuff online or spicy things off of the street, don't just ask, what do I need to quit? Ask yourself, what do I need to build? Because freedom comes not from what you cut out, but from what you gain. And let's go get these gains together. My name is Casey. I'm the Rumble Right Dad. If you know anyone who's struggling, please send them this book and maybe even ask them to watch this video. Comment if you're in sobriety yourself, or if you know somebody who's struggled with the seesaw and the roller coaster that your dopamine system causes. Let's work on this together, and let's simplify the ideas of the dopamine regulatory system through Anna Lembke's work. And I've spoken to her personally a couple times. She is a great person, somebody who's willing to work with even the little Midwestern midwits like me. Thank you to Anna, and thank you for watching. Let's do this.